I thought I was being trolled when I saw on Twitter reports of Shilo Sanders filing for bankruptcy. The family that is the most in your face with opulent jewelry, displays of wealth, has a player filing for bankruptcy. And then I had to go and fact check it. And what I found shocked me. I mean, it's almost like you're looking at the script of like a horrible B movie. I saw things from an absolutely fraudulent prep academy. Like, this behavior isn't isolated to now. It started with a fraudulent prep academy with allegations of assault from Deion Sanders himself, fraud, theft, a federal investigation, a tax lien put on that school, to falsification of bankruptcy filings by Shilo Sanders that bring into question what really happened with this stolen jewelry at Jackson State, to an absolutely brutal assault of a security officer. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about all of that and more.
Did you first find out about the altercation
What is
that
the
occurred?
Okay, what is the definition of altercation?
So it's now come to light that Shilo Sanders filed for bankruptcy in October of 2023, claiming an excess of $11 million in debts, initially claiming net assets of $478,000, and then later amending that net asset value to $320,000. And I know what you're thinking. It's the same thing I thought. Why is he filing for bankruptcy? How did he accumulate in excess of $11 million in debts? Is he spending like a crazy person? Like, it kind of made me think of 30 for 30 broke. And unfortunately, it's far more complicated than that, and sad, just flat out sad. So this has to do with an altercation that took place in 2016 at AAA Academy. Shilo evidently or is accused of attacking a security officer, John Darjean. Briefly showed a clip of a documentary he did on this in the intro. And Darjean was taking Shilo's phone. Evidently, Shilo Sanders had violated that school's no phone policy. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, even with taking his phone. It appears that Deion asked Darjean to take his phone after learning Shilo was talking to his mother, who is Deion Sanders' ex-wife since 2013. It appears once Deion learned that that his son was talking to his ex-wife Pilar, he asked Dijon, and I quote, this is coming from court documents obtained by Westword, "You're my brother in Christ. I need you to get the phone. As soon as you get the phone from him, give me a call back." This is Deion Sanders talking to Darjean. Once Darjean went to get the phone from Shilo, as instructed by Deion Sanders, Shilo Sanders brutally attacked John Darjean. So what does Shilo Sanders have to say about all this? Well, initially, he said or acknowledged that an altercation had occurred, but he lacked sufficient knowledge of it. So he's saying something happened, but I don't recall any detail of what happened. And this is where I'm unclear, because Darjean filed a civil lawsuit against Shilo in 2016, claiming, and I'm quoting from the Westword obtained court documents, sustained severe and permanent injuries, including a broken neck, damage to his cervical spine, permanent neurological injuries, and irreversible incontinence. So evidently this beating was so severe that he was taken to the emergency room by ambulance, and he has sustained these permanent injuries. Now, perhaps some of these are exaggerated. I don't know. One question I have is why there were no criminal charges brought. That had to be because Darjean didn't file any criminal charges, or he didn't make any accusations to law enforcement about what Shilo did. He instead went the civil route. Now, in a criminal proceeding, if you don't know, the standard of proof or burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning you're 99% sure. In a civil case, it's to the preponderance of the evidence. That means you're 51% sure. So there's a different proof standard, just know, from civil to criminal. Maybe that has something to do with it. It seems to me that if this beating was as he claims, there definitely should have been criminal charges brought against Shilo Sanders. So the case did go to trial in 2022. He sued him civilly for damages, and Shilo did not show up. Now, from what I read, it's not that he lost in default or Darjean won a default judgment. That's not what it says. They still had the proceedings. They still had the trial. They just did it without Shilo Sanders. And you have to wonder what that was about. It makes me think that Shilo just didn't take this seriously, and he didn't think anything would come of it. So Darjean was awarded $11.89 million in damages, which is a lot of money. And that's how we get to today. This is why Shilo Sanders is filing for bankruptcy. And look, you file for bankruptcy when it's not reasonable or possible for you to pay the damages. And this is where it gets tricky moving forward. So Darjean's attorneys claim Shilo is basically not accurately reporting his net worth and the assets that he has. And this really has to do with NIL holdings, or his ability to make income via name, image, and likeness. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And this is where I'm going to get into some speculation. In October of 2023, Shilo disclosed $75,000 worth of assets via jewelry and things like that. And then after the theft of all the jewelry that was in the coach's office via Deion Sanders, in fact, we'll put a clip in now. We'll listen to Deion after that event actually happened.
While the game was going on, somebody came in and stole every darn thing I had in my locker room.
Oh
the
my
coach's
God.
office.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Credit cards, wallet, watches. Thank God I had on my necklaces. How?
Oh, mercy.
So when I talk about quality, raising standards, and that goes for everyone, man. Not just the people on the field, not just the coaches, not just the teachers, not just the faculty, but that's everybody. Security.
Now, at the time, I'm sure all of you, and I know I thought, man, that stinks. Deion's there trying to help and build this team back up and bring a lot of attention to HBCUs. And he talks about standards, and everyone needs to hold standards, from administration even to the security guard. Interesting in hindsight now, when we now know his son allegedly beat one to near death over him taking his phone. But it would be months later that Shilo would decrease his assets by the $75,000 that was allegedly stolen. Now, I know this might seem like a rabbit hole for me to go down, or a stretch. But my speculation is that was staged to help Shilo basically in these bankruptcy proceedings, and to avoid paying an $11.89 million judgment. Now, why would I think that? And what I looked at is, does Deion Sanders or the Sanders family have any history with fraud, which is basically what Shilo's being accused of by Deion's lawyer now. He is enacting in fraud by not accurately reporting his assets. And the answer to that is Absolutely, and more so than you probably know. Going all the way back to 2012, Deion Sanders was a co-founder of something called Prime Prep Academy. Now, when he was hired at Colorado, some people brought this up as saying, hey, this might not be such a good idea because this went absolutely horribly. Now, the goal of Prime Prep Academy was to give every child, and at the time of enrollment, there were approximately 1,100 students, every one of them a free laptop. And it was really a way to empower the community and to get underprivileged kids technology and education that they might not otherwise get. Now, it would end up being a far cry from that, and I would go as far as to say just an outright fraud. Deion Sanders was not only the co-founder, but head coach of the football team. And from the time Deion Sanders took over as head coach, the football team had a plethora of issues, violating UIL rules, which dictate how you are to operate as a football team. In that charter school group, they had issues finding other teams to play. They violated rules going into recruiting players from other schools that was not allowed. It was a mess. All right. They ended up just playing as an independent school and trying to find other schools to play them as an independent. Now, Deion Sanders would be fired as head coach in 2014 by Superintendent Ron Price amid accusations of Prep Academy that include theft, particularly of the laptops, fraud that had to do with the school lunch program, staff and faculty that were never paid or were paid originally and payment was stopped, buildings that were in an absolutely unusable and dilapidated state. And the list goes on and on and on. It's not clear where all this money that was allocated and given to Prime Prep Academy went, because it didn't seem like it wasn't going to the staff. At some point, it wasn't going to maintenance of the buildings. And it doesn't look like it was going to the education of the students at that school. In fact, the elementary school tied with Prime Prep Academy was rated dead last in North Texas. Now, before Deion Sanders was fired by Ron Price, it looks like he tried to pin all the blame on his other co-founder, who was a minister and a guy that would later accuse Deion Sanders of assaulting him. So not only has Shilo Sanders been accused of assault, but in 2012, Deion Sanders himself was accused of assault, and Shilo, I guess 4 years later, would be accused of the very same thing. Now, after Deion Sanders was fired, seems like he tried to stage a coup. I'm not saying he was behind it, but the whole board of education in that area tried to remove the superintendent who fired Deion Sanders. So it looked like they were going to try and hamstring Deion back into his role as head coach. Now, there's also allegations of fraud, violations of procedure, and a bunch of other stuff with that school board as well, trying to get the superintendent out. It looks like they broke the rules. Everyone's breaking the rules here. Deion Sanders, the school board, everybody. So this was such a debacle that in July of 2014, the Texas Education Agency would revoke Prime Prep Academy's charter. It looks like they tried to appeal that decision. It doesn't look like that ever happened. Shortly before then, this looks like when Prime Prep Academy just stopped paying employees. On October 2014, the IRS actually put a $56,000 lien on Prime Prep Academy, and a federal lawsuit was filed in conjunction to what I mentioned earlier with, it looks like there was some fraud going on with how the school lunch program was held. So, Prime Prep Academy closed soon after. It was an absolute disaster, and I bring that up to say, look, these are not isolated incidents. There is a pattern of behavior with this family of what looks to be violence, dishonesty, and just outright fraud. This is not the first time a Sanders has been involved in controversy that dealt with violence and fraud, assault and fraud. So I say that all that to say, who really knows what happened with the stolen jewelry at Jackson State? Maybe it's just a really nice convenience for Shilo, or coincidence that his jewelry was stolen and now he gets to decrease his net assets that benefits him in a bankruptcy proceeding that's going on. But let's get back to Shilo Sanders. So as Shilo's lawyers and DeJean's lawyers, again, DeJean is the security officer of AAA Academy that he has allegedly assaulted and was awarded in excess of $11 million in damages for. DeJean's lawyers bring up there's two LLCs that were not claimed in Shilo's net worth in the filings for his bankruptcy. One is Big 21 and the other one is SS 21. And the whole argument of DeJean's lawyers are, look, Sanders' ability to pay, Shilo Sanders' ability to pay is closely tied in with his NIL value, and it doesn't look like any of that is claimed in his assets. Now, Shilo is named as the sole owner of these two LLCs, and I have an LLC for the channel. When you set that up, you have to put your name there, and you're listed as the sole owner. There's an address tied to it. There's no question who owns it. When Shilo is presented with this, he says he doesn't know anything about it, or he knows very little about it. He's not really associated with those companies, and he's told, look, is this your name or not? You're listed as the owner. Then he says, well, yes, I am the owner of those. There's some vehicles tied to those that I do for NIL appearances, but I definitely didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't improperly file anything in my bankruptcy proceedings. So now we see the same pattern of behavior. The Sanders family, Shilo and Dion, I can speak for, do not make a habit of ever taking responsibility for any wrongdoing they did, right? We're seeing this again. Shilo's attorneys are in response to this, claiming that Dijon is violating a state protective order. Basically, the documentation and what's discussed in these court proceedings, I guess, is not supposed to be made public. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm not a lawyer. Now, in response, Dijon's attorneys are saying, look, or DeJean are saying, you're violating our free speech. You're basically saying, you basically are screwing us, and then we can't talk about it. Now, DeJean did make a documentary, and I will put it in the link in the description along with the Westward article that most of the information for this came from. I highly recommend that you go watch it because there's a lot going on there. So I guess in conclusion and making this video, from what I could tell, this bankruptcy is a sham to avoid paying a legitimate $11.89 million judgment that Shilo didn't even go to the court proceedings to argue or attend, and he is underreporting his net worth or his assets. And he's doing this in an attempt not to pay this judgment. And there's plenty of evidence to show that the Sanders family does not hesitate from just falsifying records or engaging in fraud or engaging in violence. So that's what's going on with this is why Shilo is filing for bankruptcy. It seems like a total BS to me, to be honest. And it's something that anyone not named Sanders would probably be kicked off the team for, or anyone who's named Sanders that is playing for another team would be dismissed for the team for. But we all know it's about putting his kids above everyone else and doing what's best for them at the expense of anyone else. So let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure if you're a Deion Sanders fan, one thing you won't do is argue any of the points that I've presented here. If you're a Colorado fan, I feel bad for you. I've actually had a few Colorado fans that are legitimately Colorado fans say, man, a lot of this just makes me sick, and I can't wait to move on from this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Y'all have a good one.
how did you first find out about the altercation
What is
that
the
occurred?
Okay, what is the definition of altercation?
Okay, the altercation is the event that John Darjean was involved in with Shilo Sanders